Soon, children across the country will put on their favorite costume on Halloween night, and then with great anticipation, they'll go from house to house, collecting as much candy as they can. But is Halloween a truly innocent celebration, or does it have a darker side? How did Halloween get started? What should Christians and non-Christians alike know about participating in this event? Where did the custom of trick-or-treating come from? Why is it that at Halloween we buy a pumpkin, carve a face on it, and then put a lighted candle inside of it? Why do our children wear Halloween masks and costumes? Why do we create haunted houses, tell ghost stories, and show pictures of witches? What significance do they all have? We invite you to find out the answers to all of these questions and more on this edition of the John Ankerberg Show. Welcome to our program. I'm sure that you know that on October 31st, Halloween night, hundreds of thousands of children across America will dress in costumes which range from the cute and the sweet to the macabre and satanic. And these children will go from door to door in the neighborhood yelling, "Trick or treat!" and collecting as much candy as they can. But let me ask you this, where did the customs, the rituals, the symbols of Halloween come from? Why do we do the things that we do on Halloween night? Why do we carve jack-o'-lanterns? Why do children dress up in costumes? Where did the tradition of bobbing for apples at parties originate? And why is it that when children approach a stranger's door, that they yell out the words, "Trick or treat"? How did the custom of orange and black as the colors of Halloween get started? Well, these are just some of the questions that Dr. John Weldon and I set out to answer before writing our Facts on Halloween book. Now, Dr. Weldon has co-authored with me over 44 different books, and he's a dear, dear friend. Maybe you know that he has 3 master's degrees and 2 doctorates, one in comparative religions and the other in contemporary religious movements. He's also the chief researcher of the Ankerberg Theological Research Institute. And to start us off today, I'd like you to hear his answers to the question, where did Halloween come from? From what did Halloween originate? Here are his answers.
John, I think it's very important for parents, especially Christian parents, to realize that Halloween is not a Christian holiday. In fact, its roots go back to ancient paganism and the Celtic and druid beliefs that involved such things as divination, contact with spirits, and even something as horrible as human sacrifice.
Now, if you're not up on your history, you're probably wondering, who were the Celts and the druids? Where did they live? Tell me a little bit more about them.
Okay, who were the Celts? The Celts were a group of people that came from Asia and migrated north to northern France and the British Isles. Their priestly class were known as the druids, and they were the ones that regulated the religious observances and practices of the Celts.
Next, you may be asking, specifically, John, how does Halloween relate to the ancient pagan religious practices of the Celts? Well, Dr. Weldon explains, and I want you to listen very carefully.
Halloween relates to this ancient pagan religion in a variety of ways. For example, there were 2 key days celebrated in the Celtic religion. One of those days was the day in which the god of the dead, or the god of death, Samhain, actually was believed to release the souls of the good and evil spirits. And these good and evil spirits were released for a period of time to go back and mingle among the living. Today, the idea that Halloween involves good and evil spirits that are roaming about actually is traced back to this ancient druidic belief.
Now, what else has come down to us from the past to make Halloween what it is today? I think if you understand what Dr. John Weldon says next, you will start to put some important pieces of the puzzle together. Listen.
What the Druids and Celtic peoples were involved in really was a form of spiritism, of contacting the spirits, of attempting to appease or placate the spirits so that the spirits would treat them in a good manner. Of course, biblically, this is something that God is very concerned about. For example, in Deuteronomy 18, verses 10 and 11, God says, "Let no one be found among you who sacrifices his son or daughter in the fire." That refers to human sacrifice, something that the Celts and the Druids themselves practiced. Who practices divination or sorcery, something else that was practiced, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft or casts spells, or who is a medium or a spiritist, or who consults the dead. And of course, this is something that the ancient Celts practiced as well. In fact, some of them would actually fall upon the graves in an attempt to establish contact with the dead and to get divinatory or information about the future from the dead. Very clearly, we see that God condemns the practice that the ancient druids and the Celts engaged in of contacting the spirit world and attempting to contact the dead.
Now let me ask you a question. What is the date every year that we celebrate Halloween? Well, you know that it's October 31st. But do you know why we celebrate Halloween on October 31st? What's significant about this particular date? Well, Dr. John Weldon explains.
I think it's very interesting that the very day that we celebrate as Halloween, October 31st, was the last day of the year in the Celtic religion. Their new year began on November 1st, and on the day before their new year, it was believed that the god of death or the god of the dead actually released the different souls of the good and evil. The evil souls were ultimately decreed to go into the form of animals, whereas the good souls were allowed to come back as humans. In other words, there was a belief in reincarnation. But essentially, the people believed that souls of good and evil spirits roamed about on this day, on Hallows Eve, just before their new year began.